Welcome to the Deep Dive. We cut through the noise to give you clarity on history's key moments. Today, we're diving into something really crucial, maybe often overlooked, about the start of World War II. That's the Soviet Union's role, its decisive part, in the 1939 invasion of Poland. Our mission, to really understand the Molotov Ribbentrop Pact, that secret deal between Hitler and Stalin, and how Stalin invading from the east right after Hitler attacked just completely sealed Poland's fate. This is your shortcut to getting the full picture, not just the headlines. We'll cover some surprising details, crucial insights into how that pincer move really crushed Polish resistance.
Yeah, and to really get what happened in 39, you have to understand Poland's situation back then. It was difficult, to say the least. Remember, this was a country that had literally been wiped off the map multiple times, partitioned by its neighbors. It only regained independence in 1918 after World War I.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So imagine being reborn after, over a century under foreign rule, only to find yourself stuck right between two huge aggressive powers, Germany and the Soviet Union.
That sounds like an absolutely impossible tightrope walk from day one. What's interesting, though, is you often hear Poland historically saw the Soviet Union as the main threat, maybe even more than Germany initially. Why was that?
Well, absolutely. Poland had the very fresh memory of the Polish-Soviet War in 1920. And the Bolshevik Revolution right next door, that was a huge ideological threat, and a territorial one, too.
Okay.
There was this constant fear, of Soviet expansionism, especially into places like Ukraine and Belarus, right on Poland's borders. Now, German aggression definitely became, undeniable in the mid-30s, but that deep-seated mistrust of Moscow, it was rooted in history, in ideology. It made it hard for Poland to fully shift its focus, even as, the Nazi threat grew bigger and bigger.
Right. Okay. So a nation with this deep historical scar caught between these two powerful expansionist states, you can already feel the pressure cooker situation. So let's jump to October 1938. Hitler's demands on Poland are really ramping up. The German foreign minister, Ribbentrop, he lays out some pretty big terms, doesn't he?
He does. The return of Danzig to Germany.
Which was a free city then, right? Under the League of Nations.
Exactly. An autonomous city.
Yeah.
And Germany also demanded these extraterritorial transit routes, basically highways or railways, through the Polish corridor.
Ah, the corridor. That thin strip connecting Poland to the sea but cutting off East Prussia from the rest of Germany. Crucial territory.
Absolutely vital for Poland's sea access. And Germany tried to sweeten the deal a bit. They offered to recognize Poland's borders, extend their non-aggression pact for 25 years, even suggesting Poland join the Anti-Comintern Pact, which was basically an anti-Soviet alliance.
Okay, so on paper, some potentially appealing offers, especially given that historical fear of the Soviets. But what was Poland's actual reaction? Did they even consider accepting?
Their reluctance was deep, and looking back, probably very wise for their independence. They saw clearly that accepting these terms meant becoming a German satellite state.
Right.
Just, losing their real sovereignty. It would have isolated them from potential allies, like France and Britain, too. Poland's foreign minister, Józef Beck, he actually had this vision of Poland leading a third Europe.
A third Europe? What was that?
Sort of a block of independent states from the Baltic down to the Adriatic.
Sure.
He wanted Poland to be a leader in the region, not subservient to either Germany or the Soviet Union.
That's a pretty bold vision for a country in their spot. Was it ever really realistic, though? Or maybe a bit of wishful thinking, given the neighbors?
Oh, certainly ambitious.
Marta?
Yeah, perhaps overly so. Poland thought, by trying to balance between Germany and the USSR, they could keep their independence, but it also meant they wouldn't join any military alliance aimed specifically at the USSR, even though, as we said, they saw the Soviets as, enemy number one.
That sounds like a really complicated, maybe even contradictory foreign policy to manage.
It was incredibly difficult.
And then, as German aggression just kept escalating, Britain and France finally shifted. After their appeasement policy blew up with the invasion of Czechoslovakia in March 39, they gave these explicit military guarantees to Poland. That must have felt like a lifeline. But you mentioned there was a catch, something that hampered Poland's ability to actually defend itself.
Precisely. That's the crucial point. Despite these diplomatic assurances, which were vital, Poland desperately needed military credits, money to modernize its army, buy weapons, raw materials. They asked Britain and France for significant help, but it was largely denied, or just came way too late.
Really? How much are we talking?
Well, Britain, for example, only granted about £8 million by July. which sounds like a lot, but it was nowhere near what Poland actually needed to face the Wehrmacht.
Wow. So they had promises of backup, but not really the means to hold out until backup arrived.
Exactly. Poland was left largely on its own, practically speaking, when the attack came.
An almost impossible situation. And then came the diplomatic bombshell, the thing that just shattered everything for Poland, the Hitler-Stalin Pact. What was the absolute worst part of that deal for Poland? The bit that just redrew their entire future.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it was the signing of the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, what we call the Molotov Ribbentrop Pact, August 24th, 1939, in Moscow. Publicly. Just a promise not to attack each other. Seems straightforward, maybe cynical, but straightforward.
But there was more.
Oh, yes. The devastating part was hidden. The secret additional protocol.
A secret protocol? Okay, that never sounds good. What did it say?
It laid out very precisely how they would divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, German and Soviet spheres. And in practical terms, this meant East Poland, plus the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, were assigned to the Soviet sphere.
Assigned? Like property?
Essentially, yes. They even drew a line on the map, mostly following rivers like the Vistula and the San. It was a blueprint for carving Poland up. A fourth partition, agreed by two dictators, without a single Pole involved.
Unbelievable. And the immediate impact. This must have destroyed any last hope Britain and France had of maybe, just maybe, getting the Soviets on side against Hitler.
Completely shattered it. It isolated Poland utterly, left them facing two giants, now suddenly aligned, at least temporarily, a total betrayal of expectations.
How did Poland react? Did they even know about the secret part?
The pact itself was a huge shock. And here's something really poignant. Because Poland had that deep, long-running mistrust of the Soviets, they initially, it seems, didn't fully believe the USSR would actually invade alongside Germany.
Really, even after the pact.
They perhaps saw it as cynical maneuvering, maybe a temporary truce, not a plan for joint aggression.
Yeah.
They underestimated Stalin's opportunism, his willingness to carve up their country. That underestimation was, well, catastrophic.
Just days later, September 1st, 1939, Germany invades. They use these fake incidents, right? Like the Gleiwitz radio tower attack.
Yes. Staged Polish attacks as a pretext. Then they unleashed the Blitzkrieg. This lightning wore tanks, motorized infantry, dive bombers, all coordinated, moving incredibly fast. Poland's defenses were hit hard.
But, and this is a detail that always surprises me, the Soviets didn't immediately jump in, did they, despite the secret deal? Why the delay from Stalin?
It's one of the really fascinating bits of timing in all this. No, they didn't join straight away. There's a report from the German ambassador in Moscow around September 10th. He quotes Molotov, the Soviet foreign minister, saying the Soviet government was, and this is a quote, completely overwhelmed by unexpectedly rapid German military successes.
Wow, so the German Blitzkrieg was too fast, even for Stalin.
Apparently so. Molotov apparently said they needed another 2 to 3 weeks of preparation before the Red Army could move into Poland.
2 to 3 weeks.
Yes. It suggests a few things. Maybe Stalin was genuinely surprised by the speed of the German advance. Maybe he needed time to mobilize his own forces properly. Or perhaps, more cynically, he wanted to wait and see how things developed, make sure Germany had done the heavy lifting, and then just march in to collect his share of the spoils.
So you've got Germany blitzing through Poland, and the Soviets are, like, hitting the snooze button on their invasion plan because things are moving too quickly. It's a grim picture, this tactical waiting game. What does it say about their alliance? Was it trust or just pure opportunism?
Oh, it leaned heavily towards opportunism. Definitely. Hitler needed Soviet neutrality and resources. Stalin wanted territory and a buffer zone. Trust, probably very little. Stalin moving too fast might have meant less territory for him or getting drawn into a messier conflict. The delay really highlights a pragmatic, self-interested approach from Moscow, not a unified plan.
Okay, so the waiting game ends. What does this finally mean for Poland? The Red Army moves in. But they needed a justification, right? They couldn't just say, we're invading because we agreed to.
Exactly. They needed a pretext. So on September 17, 1939, the Red Army crossed the border into eastern Poland. Molotov's official line was, well, incredibly cynical. He claimed the Polish state and the Polish government had factually ceased to exist.
Ceased to exist, but they were still fighting the Germans. The government was still functioning, even if under duress.
Precisely. He argued that because the state had supposedly collapsed, all treaties between the USSR and Poland were now out of force. And therefore, the Red Army was just intervening to, quote, protect the lives and property of the population of West Ukraine and West Belarus, ethnic minorities within Poland's borders.
A purely legalistic and frankly false argument from Moscow. How did the rest of the world see this? Was it accepted? What was the actual legal situation?
Legally, internationally, the Polish state had absolutely not ceased to exist. Its government might have been fleeing, its armies retreating, but its sovereignty remained intact. So the Soviet invasion was, without question, an act of war,
Yeah.
aggression, a clear breach of the Polish-Soviet non-aggression pact they had signed back in 1932.
A flagrant violation.
Yes, though with the wider war breaking out, international condemnation was maybe more muted than it might have been otherwise. Everyone was focused on Germany.
And the military situation in eastern Poland at that point must have been desperate. Most Polish forces were fighting the Germans in the west. What was left to face the Soviets?
Eastern Poland was, as you said, largely stripped bare militarily. Most units had been sent west. There were border protection units, the KOP, but not much else in terms of large formations. So the Red Army faced, initially, quite minimal organized resistance.
Right.
And the reception was varied, tragically so sometimes. In some places, local authorities, totally misunderstanding what was happening, actually greeted the Soviet troops in a friendly way.
Believing they were coming to help against the Germans.
Exactly, believing they were allies. But in other areas, there was fierce fighting, like the Battle of Zak, where some Polish units actually managed to briefly recapture the town from the Soviets. Pockets of desperate resistance.
That idea of local authorities welcoming the invaders because of the confusion, that's just heartbreaking. It really shows the chaos.
It truly does. And meanwhile, the German High Command, they openly welcomed the Soviet invasion. They saw it as a huge military relief.
Of course they did.
Because now Poland was caught in this impossible pincer. Attack from the west, attack from the east, any chance of regrouping, retreating, setting up a new defense line, it just evaporated.
So that sealed it. The government had to flee.
Yes. The remaining Polish government, President Mościcki included, they crossed the border into neutral Romania around September 17th, 18th. But they were interned there, effectively neutralized.
And then the two invaders formalized their conquest. The German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty, signed just a couple of weeks later, end of September 39. That was more than just drawing lines, wasn't it?
Oh, much more. It formalized the demarcation line, largely along the Bug River, making those secret spheres of influence permanent borders. For now. And chillingly, it also included agreements for population exchanges based on ethnicity, moving Germans, Ukrainians, Belarusians around.
So literally redrawing the map and rearranging the people, treating a nation like spoils of war.
That's exactly what it was. A direct consequence of the secret deal, turning a sovereign country into territory to be divided up.
The final outcome, then, was swift and brutal. Organized Polish resistance basically ended by early October 1939. The last field units surrendered.
Yes, by October 6th, it was essentially over for the regular army. That relentless pincer Germans from the west, Soviets from the east left no room for maneuver, no path for sustained defense, or even an orderly retreat. Poland was swallowed whole in under 6 weeks.
So looking back at it all, it's crystal clear. The Molotov Ribbentrop Pact, and crucially, the Soviet invasion that followed, even with that initial delay, that was the definitive blow. It wasn't just a German invasion Poland faced. It was a coordinated ghoul invasion that made the partition complete and brutal and just rendered any chance of organized national resistance impossible. A stark lesson in power politics.
It really was, and it raises a tough question, I think, for any nation facing threats. When you're facing an existential threat from one massive neighbor, how much does the betrayal, or maybe just the opportunism, of another powerful neighbor, even one you've always mistrusted, how much does that truly decide your fate? Does it just speed up something inevitable? Or does it fundamentally change the game, snuffing out that last tiny flicker of hope?
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? About the choices leaders make, those visions of a third Europe that never stood a chance, and just the devastating reality of being caught between two utterly ruthless powers. It's a complex, dark chapter, but absolutely essential for understanding how World War II truly began. Something to keep pondering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.